Now that we've talked about resources, capabilities, and competencies, we're going to talk about how you can identify your most valuable resources and capabilities, essentially your competencies. Now, if you haven't watched that first video, I strongly recommend it. Link right down here in the description. Watch that one first. It'll help some of this maybe make a little bit more sense. So what makes a capability a competence? What makes a capability valuable enough to actually give you a competitive advantage? Identifying these most valuable capabilities allows you to build your business strategy around those capabilities and also to strengthen those capabilities that you most need to be able to compete. One of the most influential business strategy academic papers ever was written by Barney in 1991, and he identified these 4 criteria to help you identify your most valuable resources and capabilities. These are that your resources should be valuable, rare, costly to imitate, and non-substitutable. If you can answer yes to all of these, that they are valuable, rare, costly to imitate, and non-substitutable, then you have a resource or capability that can set your company apart and provide you with a sustainable competitive advantage. First, we're going to talk about valuable capabilities. Remember that valuable capabilities, or capabilities in general, are the things that you actually are able to do with your resources. So valuable resources help a company to do something valuable or take advantage of an opportunity. These are things like manufacturing products, providing services. It could be something like accurate accounting, and many companies actually have accounting as the service that they provide. Another valuable capability could be a mobile mechanic business, where the mechanic is actually able to go and help you on the side of the road where you're broken down. These are valuable capabilities that allow a company to do something to serve customers. Next, we're going to talk about rare capabilities. So anybody with a broom can sweep a floor. Sweeping a floor is valuable. You actually have to do it. Maybe it's not hugely valuable for a company. We don't necessarily think about it, but it's something that you have to be able to do. But everybody has that capability. Or if they don't, they can get it for about $8 at the dollar store to go get a broom. But the capability of cleaning the floor is not rare. Anyone can do it. It's not going to give you a competitive advantage if all of your customers have it. Another example of this would be something like Coca-Cola. If you see, so Coca-Cola has an extremely valuable brand. It's very valuable, but it's not necessarily rare because Dr. Pepper also has a valuable brand, and 7-Up has a valuable brand, and Pepsi has a valuable brand, and there are many valuable brands. Some may be more valuable than others, but that doesn't necessarily make them rare. They all happen to have that, so that alone, the rarity, isn't what gives the competitive advantage. If a capability is rare, that means, or a resource is rare, that means that few other companies have it. So a few examples of these would include things like the first company to reach 5G service has a rare capability. At that time, they are the only company that has it. Amazon is the only retail company with a fully integrated supply chain that includes an airline, a trucking fleet, distribution centers, and delivery vans. Some retail companies have some distribution capabilities. Some have very complex distribution capabilities. But Amazon's complete supply chain is unique. Even Walmart doesn't meet the same level as Amazon has. This requires lots of resources. But the fully integrated capability that Amazon has is both valuable and rare. Now we're going to talk about capabilities or resources that are difficult or costly to imitate. And there are 3 main reasons that they would be difficult or costly to imitate. And these include a historical cause, something that happened over time, an ambiguous cause, something that's very difficult to understand, and then also social complexity. We're going to talk briefly about each of these. So first of all, with an historical cause, if something took decades to build, a brand name or a reputation, for example, that's not something that you can just build overnight. Can you build a valuable brand in a relatively short time? It might be possible, but you're going to be investing billions of dollars in marketing to build that brand. you can't do it immediately. So that historical cause, something that took time to build, provides a competitive advantage that is difficult to imitate. Next is the ambiguous cause, and this one is more difficult perhaps to understand, but sometimes you will see a company that has an advantage that you can't necessarily identify. You look at that company and say, well, obviously they're doing something right, but we can't necessarily say they have a good supply chain, but so does another company. Maybe they have good engineering, but so does another company, but for some reason they seem to do it better. That ambiguous cause, and I'll just give you an example of that. Samsung computer memory manufacturing, for some reason, just does better. I don't know exactly why. They have a lot of the same resources, they have quality engineers, but for some reason, they just seem to have an advantage. And then the third of these is social complexity. You've worked at companies, or maybe you are working at a company now, where people just get along really well. And because they get along really well, there's great teamwork, things just get done better. It doesn't mean that the equipment was better or that the employees had better knowledge. They just work together better. Another thing with social complexity might be the relationships that you have outside the company. You have the right relationships with buyers or with your suppliers that allow you to have somewhat of an advantage relative to others that don't have those same relationships. Finally, we get to those resources and capabilities that are non-substitutable. Quick example, as we start here, is access to rare earth minerals. There are certain places in the world where some things are mined or taken out of the earth that are not found anywhere else. If you happen to have those, and you happen to have access to those, that cannot be substituted in any other way. It certainly is valuable and certainly is rare. It's also non-substitutable. Some examples of non-substitutable resources would be firm-specific knowledge, things that only people inside that firm understand or know. Something like the Google algorithm, or perhaps patents and innovation, maybe recipes that set your company apart, that are giving you an advantage. Some companies also have better execution of their business strategy, and this is something else that you cannot substitute. There are, for example, some sports teams, think of college football teams, some of them have very complex schemes. Others have very simple schemes, but they execute them better. And that can still give you an advantage if you simply execute your strategy better. An example of better execution is Toyota manufacturing. Toyota has built a reputation around quality manufacturing that gives it a competitive advantage. Doesn't mean that the equipment is necessarily better, they're just better at actually executing that manufacturing process. To use a non-business example of a substitutable resource that might help you think in a different way if you are going up against a difficult competitor, I want to talk about The Princess Bride. In The Princess Bride, there was a fight between a very large man named Fezzik and a fairly small man named Wesley. So Fezzik, in a hand-to-hand combat, would appear to have a significant advantage because of his size and strength. However, Wesley, sorry, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, you should go see it maybe before you finish watching this video, but Wesley was able to substitute agility and speed and quickness for Fezzik's strength. We can see something similar in business. There are some companies that have huge economies of scale. Maybe it comes with a lot of overhead, but the per unit efficiency is so high that they have a great advantage. That is also something that could be substituted by small companies with low overhead. There are ways to get around that if you can design your strategy to substitute for other ways that people keep their costs low. Capabilities that meet some but not all of these can provide an advantage, but it's likely something that competitors are going to be able to overtake. But if you are able to provide all of these or answer yes to all of these 4 criteria, then you can have a sustainable competitive advantage. So to look at this, if you can say no to any of these, that you're not valuable, rare, costly to imitate, or non-substitutable, you're at a competitive disadvantage and will have below average returns. If you can say yes to some but not all, you may be at competitive parity and have average returns. If you can say yes to most of these, particularly valuable and rare, you may have a temporary competitive advantage and have above average to average returns. But others will be able to imitate or substitute over time if you can't answer yes to all of these. If you can answer yes to every one of these, you have a sustainable competitive advantage and you will have above average returns, or you probably will have above average returns as long as you're able to execute your strategy and use those resources appropriately. So I want you to identify 2 capabilities in your company. How do they stack up against others, and how do they stack up relative to these 4 criteria? Are they valuable, rare, costly to imitate, or non-substitutable? If so, you have a competitive advantage. Based on these responses, would you say that your advantage is sustainable? Would you say that you have a competence that really sets your company apart? If not, I also want you to think about how you could strengthen that. Thanks so much for joining. Take care.